Well, welcome to Create Talks. Woohoo! I just got back from Taiwan. It was amazing, all the food. But I have a special treat for you. Yay! We just started our School of Ministry third-year positions, and so I'm introducing you to Hilary Bowen. Give it up for Hilary out there. Woohoo!
Hi, everybody.
Hilary is amazing. So Hilary has a heart for how art in the presence of God, all different kinds of creative forms, can really intersect and can bring the presence of God, and how they move together and how things grow. A lot of you might think, oh, if I just do well in this creative expression, if I just can achieve this, if I can just get to go to school or whatever it is that you really want to do. But if you don't enjoy the process, if you don't find God in that process, then you're missing out. So Hilary's going to talk about that. But now, you grew up in China.
I did.
It's amazing. And you fell in love with both dance and art.
Yeah.
And writing. And share your beginnings and how God gave you passion in these areas.
Yeah. So ever since I was little, I'd hear music and I just couldn't stop my body from moving. It just felt like I was just so much a part of who I was. But I didn't really start to engage creativity until a lot later in life. It was just kind of one of those like, oh, you're a kid, you dance, you move, you do whatever, arts and crafts. But then in high school, one of my friends was like, hey, we should start writing together. And so I started writing with her. It was actually off of a series of dreams we had. We started writing stories together.
So it was a collaboration like Jared Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. That's important, guys.
Totally.
Wow.
And similarly, actually with dance, art, and writing, it was all the result of other people seeing stuff in me and maybe not necessarily calling it out prophetically, but just being like, hey, let's do this together. Let's try. My best friend lived in a different city than me, and I spent a week with her in high school, and she was like, I'm going to have this art party. And I'm like, I don't do art. I'm not an artist. Like, sometimes I dance, sometimes I write, but I don't do art. And she's like, anybody can do art. Like, it's easy. And she was like, you have to come. You're my best friend. You're visiting me, so you're going to come to this party. So I went to this party with her, and we just made art. And it clicked something in me where I was like, oh, I can do this. And I can enjoy it, and I can have fun, and I can connect with people. I can connect with God through this. Similarly with dance, I had the opportunity to travel with a group called King's Kids for a number of summers. Woo-hoo. King's Kids is related to YWAM. It's for young people. A lot of them are performing arts based, so that really sparked my love for dance and choreography and what that looked like reaching out into the community. But it's interesting because after high school, I moved back to the States and kind of set all that aside. I was like, okay, well, you know, that was part of my past. That was part of my childhood.
Right.
But now it's time to
be serious.
Be a serious adult. I'm going to do adult things.
Creativity is for children, for adults, no.
Not so much. And then oddly enough, it's like God just kept bringing it back because I needed one extra class in university and ended up being able to sign up for a dance class.
Wow.
And through that journey of even one of my professors being a believer and a spirit-filled believer sparked that in me of like, oh, dance could be something that I could actually run with, actually use in my life. And I think it was in that period of my life where I really started getting passionate about the intersection of how dance and art and writing and just different things can come together in our daily lives, in culture, where we can really start to encounter the presence of God in a lot of different ways. Because I know, like here in school especially, I've spent almost 3 years like just focusing on the presence of God and what it means to really be with Jesus. But having come from a background where I also had a lot of different passions, it's been really cool to see where God's like, well, and how about in this piece where you can encounter my presence through this or through dance or through writing, where it sometimes even looks very different than I would expect.
And it's crazy because sometimes we think, and I know, Hilary, you know this because this is one of the things we teach in the school. It's like we really do create from love, not for love. And so a lot of times I know for me and growing up, that was never ever taught. Like I always felt like, no, I had to do well because it made me significant. And so part of that process is kind of laying that aside and then moving into, oh wait, I can encounter God's presence. And even like you said, through art that I don't necessarily do. But what makes you curious as you create? What is that process that you walk into?
Yeah. For me, in dance and choreography, because that's primarily what I use as what I walk in as a creative expression, what makes me curious is the infinite number of possibilities, because it's such a in the moment type of art form. It's very ephemeral. It's here and then it's gone. And unlike other forms of art that are maybe an extension of you, but they're a little bit disconnected, dances, like your instrument is your body. So it creates not only these endless possibilities, because once you stop dancing, it no longer exists, but it also creates this really beautiful sense of vulnerability and intimacy, because you are the art that's happening. And then when you bring other people into that, it just becomes that much more about what's going to happen now. What am I about to step into with these other people as we choose to move? And I primarily do a lot of improvisation. And so I've just loved getting to explore, what does that look like? And I think that's where my curiosity is kind of based in creativity. But I was also thinking about but how often do I walk into a studio or sit down to write and I'm not curious at all? And remembering that, I can always access curiosity if I know where to look. And sometimes that looks like putting creative limitations on yourself. And one of the things that I learned in school and that I've learned through improvisation is if you get stuck, pick one thing and do that until the inspiration comes back. So with dance, it's pick a part of your body to move from. What if all my movement came from my elbow or from my wrist or any other part of your body, until you get back into, because I think when we stop being curious when we feel stuck.
Yeah, I think you're
obviously.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
So with that, it's okay, if I can stop looking at the fact that I'm stuck, oh no, the blank page, what colors do I use or what words do I put down? If you stop thinking about being stuck or about emptiness being scary, you can move into what possibility do I want to step into, even if it ends up being a terrible mistake, dancing with my elbow is not actually very interesting and there's only a certain number of things I can do with it, but it gets me out of I'm not doing anything.
Don't you think it gets you out of your head and it gets you into, in anything that we're doing, whether it's art or whether it's film or innovative ideas, it's it's that motion of creating that gets you moving. And then you can, it's like a car. It's if a car is going somewhere, it's much easier to get to a destination. But when you just stop, it can't. So
yeah. And so sometimes even if I'm existing or creating within a certain expression like dance or art or writing, if I'm feeling stuck in that expression, I'll move to something different. So a lot of times when I sit down to write and I'm I don't know where to start, what chapter I'm working on, where I'm going with this book, okay, but if I just switch and write a letter or write a piece of poetry or
do something different,
because it still gets your brain moving, it still gets your body moving, it begins to engage, I think, really your whole being, all three parts of you.
Hey, we're live, so if you have any questions for Hilary, go ahead and ask her. Or if you have any comments about how you get unstuck, let us know. We'd love to hear your comments and where you're from. My next question is how can those who are watching follow their passion and begin the journey of creating? You have been working and studying in choreography, and you've been mastering so many different things, written a book, etc. But tell me a little bit about where does that come from? Those, the passion, and how does that help you in your journey?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. And I feel so many different ways to answer that. I would say the first thing I would do is bring somebody else along on the journey. if that's a friend, if that's a family member, if that's Holy Spirit, be like, Holy Spirit, like, I want to do something. Will you do it with me? Because I think another thing that makes us feel stuck is being alone, or feeling like we're alone, or thinking that we're alone.
Yeah, come on.
And I'm learning in my own life right now to take risk and ask people to be part of stuff, to value myself enough to be like, oh, this is something I want to do. This is something I'm passionate about. Like, will you do this with me? Like, will you partner with me in this? Even if it feels scary, risking and being vulnerable and saying, like, I don't know if I can do this by myself. But I think, again, and with dance, but with all other kinds of creativity and art, we can go so much farther. Not that it's even about going somewhere necessarily, but it just widens the field of what's possible if you're doing it together.
It's just better when you're together, isn't it? Like, I mean, it just is. And I mean, Jesus taught us that. Like, he said, hey, go out by twos. He knows that we all need encouragement. So, hey, I want you to go ahead this week and figure out a person that you could share whatever your passion is, whether it's art or dance or writing or fashion or an idea for business or culinary. Believe me, Taiwan, they have that down. Whatever it is, but share with somebody and see how that doesn't spark you and help you grow.
And also, it doesn't have to be that you are wanting to create in the same way either.
Totally.
Like, some of my most beautiful intersections with people have been like, oh my gosh, I heard you play this instrument. Would you want to, like, come spend an hour in the studio with me while I dance, and you can do whatever you want musically and see what happens? Or I love to bake, and so I'm like, hey, can I feed you this thing that I'm trying? So participation and engagement can look like a lot of different things. So don't let yourself get stuck in the headspace of like, well, I don't have another friend who paints or writes or does drama. But you have people, I mean, everybody's creative, right? Like, we're all made in God's image.
Yes,
so
please,
everybody
needs to understand that. It's watching, yes.
And so I think creativity is actually how you go about something almost as much as it is what you're doing.
Exactly.
Because you could be, like, I could be a dancer or be a writer and do something that's totally not creative if I'm going about it from a place of guilt or fear or obligation or whatever.
Comparison.
Yeah. But I can also do something that people are like, that's totally not what I would consider creativity, and the way I go about it makes it super creative.
Exactly. Creativity, it should be play, and it should be fun. It should be part of our passion, and it should be something that we can't wait to do. And if we lose that part, we need to re-examine where we lost that. And that's what you're talking about. It's like that curiosity is where it starts. So good. Yeah. So share with us some testimonies on dance.
Yeah, so many good stories.
Come on.
Even before I moved to Reading to come to BSSM, I had a huge heart for being like, God, I want to see your presence come on earth in a tangible way. And I don't know what that looks like, but I love dancing, and I would love to see what changing the environment looks like through movement. So everywhere I would go, I would start just taking a couple of minutes and just focusing on God, on his presence within me, and being like, okay, now I'm going to move. And I would just start moving. And I don't necessarily have a lot of like cause and effect testimonies from that, but I've danced now on 3 different continents in multiple countries, just engaging the Spirit of God within me and learning that just because he's with me, that's enough. That it's not about what I do, but it's about who I am and walking in relationship with him, which then makes what I do significant. I mean, I think that's been a huge journey for me, testimony-wise, and even then dancing here at Bethel in the healing rooms, of not always having a ton of opportunity to minister one-on-one and see crazy healing encounters, but being like, oh, like when I walked in this morning or whatever, the room was feeling a little hectic, or it felt like people were stressed. But then when I started moving, I watched that shift. I watched that change.
Come on.
And so I think for me, it's funny, even testimonies fall into like certain categories, but like environment shifting testimonies.
Yeah.
And then activating other people. I was in Croatia a couple summers ago, and these two little girls in this church that we were ministering to were like, oh, we want to dance, like, but we don't know how. And just by encouraging them, being like, you can do this. Like, it's not about what your movement looks like, but it's about engaging with God through this process. I watched them totally step into this place of confidence and dance during worship in front of the church. And it was crazy because I felt angelic presence everywhere as they were moving. And to be able to watch and support them even as they stepped into that. I've never danced before, but I love moving, and what you were doing looks like fun, so I'm going to try it and just take a risk and be brave. Is one of my favorite stories. And then actually on that same trip, we were doing a prayer walk, or maybe we were just walking around the city even, but we came up to this one courtyard that overlooked the city, and I got up there, and all of a sudden I was hit with all these feelings of discouragement and fear, and I don't want to be here, and I started having trouble breathing and just crushing fear. And my leader was like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know what's going on. And she's like, do you want to dance? And my first thought was, no, I don't want to dance. I can't breathe. And I was like, oh, maybe that's exactly why I do need to like step into that. And as I pushed through, as I was like, God, I want to meet you in this place. I want to encounter you. I felt that darkness just lift.
Come on.
And it was, for me, such a great learning example of like moving in opposition to what I'm feeling in the natural. That's been huge. And then one more testimony if I have time. But in first year, I took your creativity track, and the very first week you were having your third years come up and be like, this is what creativity can release. And it was actually your third year for dance that year. She was like, I feel like I have a word of knowledge for healing for wrists. Does anybody want to come up here and dance with me?
Totally.
And does anybody have wrist pain? And a couple gals had wrist pain, and I raised my hand, and so I got to go up, and she's like, hey, we're just going to do this like little dance or whatever. And their wrist pain just completely went away just because God likes to meet us when we step out and risk. And it just reminds me like all miracles are easy because we're not the ones doing them. You know, it's just us showing up with our yes and being like, okay, God, here I go.
It's crazy. Like, I think, Hilary, one of the things that you brought home that's so important for everybody that's watching out there is number one, like it's time for you to explore your creativity. It's time to find out what it is that you burn for. Find your passion. Go after that. Be curious and find out what you carry, and be open to new things, like what happened when your friend said, hey, come on over and do art. No, don't do art. Oh my gosh, wait a second, I'm feeling the presence of God. Sometimes we get stuck, and you talked about that, and the importance of, oh my gosh, I think I just need to do it and press in, or I need to do something else and get my mind off of it and then come back to it. And I love the fact that it's not just about what you can see as a manifestation for others, but it's changed you, and it's made you be able to face your fear and go after that. So so this is huge. You know, how do presence and passion intersect? They intersect in who we are and how we encounter God in His goodness. And so I want you just to pray and just to release all that you carry. This is and a part of the process too for all of you that are watching right now is like, if you do not know that you have permission to try new things, you'll never know what God can say through you in different creative expression. So sometimes that's the beauty of how God has wired us. Sometimes that risk in doing what we don't feel adequate in is what releases what we really love and our passion as well. So I want you to think outside the box. I am only music. I can only do music. And I want you to think about, oh, maybe I should do a poem, or maybe I should do this. And think outside the box of what you've been taught, and think about experiencing God through different types of creativity. And that's going to help you to grow in all different kinds of ways. So don't limit when He's the creator God. We don't want to limit Him, but we want to let Him in. So I want you to pray. Get ready. Hilary is amazing. So if you have a heart to intersect with God and grow in passion and find your creative destiny, I want you just to reach your hands out and go for it.
Wow. Jesus, we just thank you for who you are. And I think about even how everything you do is creative, because that's what you started when you created the world. Like, everything you made was creative, and we're part of what you made, which makes us creative too. So I just bless everybody who's watching.
Yeah, come on.
Just with a revelation of being part of that original creative act and having access to that same creativity. I bless you with new ideas, new ways to step out, new ways to take risks. I bless you with the courage to try. And to really, just like Theresa said, to find that joy in the journey, in the process, that every time we encounter God, it changes us. And He's the happiest, most whole, most joy-filled person out there. So that every time you try something and you create, that you would touch a piece of that joy and that passion. Yeah. Bless you guys. Amen.
Amen. Woo! Hilary, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And again, just go after creating with God this week. Find out what your purpose is and your passion, and try new things and share it with someone else too, so that you can grow even more. And remember, you are born to create. We'll see you next week. Bye.